the actual red flag defending.
I think it's like
People, Deluded, I'm back again. Now, with the Premier League being close to restarting, I had to get a special guest. And some of you remember I've had content with him before. It's been a while. Andrew, how you doing, my man? You all right?
I'm all right. Feeling a little under the weather today, so I'll do my best. And if there's the occasional cough along the way, you'll have to forgive me.
I mean, you know, you make up with the cough with knowledgeable content. I'm sure people will put up with it, my guy, man. I'm sure it's fine, man. So, yeah, appreciative, as I was saying off air, for obviously doing this because I know you're under the weather. But hopefully, speaking about Arsenal, can make you feel a bit better. So, the first thing I want to kick off with, because I haven't had the chance of asking you, what have you made of Arsenal so far? The good, bad, and if there is any ugly, like, let me have it, man. What have you made of our game so far?
Don't know that there's a lot of ugly this season, which is great, isn't it? You know, it's been so encouraging because I think we all maybe had an idealistic vision of what Mikel Arteta wanted to do with this team, but there are questions about whether or not he was going to be able to do it. I think he's done it, or we're certainly getting there. You know, and the football we've played this season has been fantastic. There's real character and resilience in the team. There's definitely a togetherness that I know we sometimes, you know, from the outside we like to think, oh yeah, this looks like a good bunch of lads, but actually this really does look like a good bunch of lads. And you know, we're not top of the table by accident. There's, you know, you don't get top of the table 5 points ahead of Man City by accident. This is down to hard work, good coaching, commitment from the players, and you know, just kicking on from the improvements that I think we did make last season, even if last season finished a little bit disappointingly.
The foundations were being put in there.
Yeah, exactly.
There's facts on that.
Yeah. I think that's right. You know, and they've added well in the summer, and hopefully they might add again in January, and you know, we can continue from where we left off. That's the big question though now, is like, how much is this World Cup break going to impact us and all the other teams, I guess.
What because you kind of jumped the gun and you've set it up perfectly. When you say, I don't want to say concerns, but where would it be for you? Because it's almost like, as you said, you know, we started like a house on fire. A consequence of us doing numerous good things has led to us being top, you know, looking above top four and being top of the table. But what sort of question marks do you have? Because for me, I would say for me, it's form. Form to a degree goes out the window for everyone because we haven't played for a month. You kind of touched on it there with January. You know, on the best of days, we had a good summer window. Probably would have liked us to bring a few in and just kind of complement the side. And obviously, we've seen Jesus' injury. So what sort of concerns or question marks or fear of the unknown sort of things are you waiting to see?
Just the momentum, the stop to our momentum, which was really badly timed. You know, we were going so well, and even when we weren't playing particularly well, we were getting results. You know, we weren't. I think we've played some brilliant stuff this season, but we've also got some results where we haven't necessarily been quite at the same level as our best performances, and that's really good. And momentum is so hard to build, you know, and quite what we're going to face when we play West Ham next week, I don't quite know. So that would be sort of my main concern, is like, can we just pick up where we left off? Can we get going again quickly? Are any of the guys going to have a bit of a World Cup hangover? Is Saka or Martinelli, you know, are they going to be disheartened, disappointed? Is William Saliba going to come back and be like, oh, I could have been part of a squad that won the World Cup? And instead, you know, those kinds of things that, you know, I think they're sort of unprecedented because nobody's had to face them in mid-season before. So that would be the main thing. And then I suppose the other thing is sort of squad depth and, you know, fitness and few little injuries that are a bit unfortunate, a little bit worrying as well.
I mean, you said it. I think the one thing that gives me confidence, especially with literally we have to wait and see because we don't know, as you kind of touched on it, is we've got this grit, we've got this determination, especially if we're going to win a Premier League or achieve anything. It's not always how good you are, as you know. It's always sometimes at your worst. And I don't think we've been terrible in any game this season, but there's been moments or 10-minute periods where things haven't gone our way. I look at Leeds away. I look at Fulham at home with Eddie off the bench. And it just feels like in previous years, we would have just succumbed to whatever reality was waiting upon us. But it it's like we go against that. And like you said, it doesn't matter if it's the squad players, the first team regulars, the more experienced players. It's like it's all about the collective. Obviously, there's egos there, but the egos are not coming before what we're doing. And I think a lot of that is because as a football club, we're galvanized, from the fans to Mikel Arteta to the players to people like ourselves. It's because we're seeing something to believe in. Hopefully next season we can win at Old Trafford or St Mary's, but you can't have it all. Kind of going back towards, you know, with it being, I believe, on the day now that we're ironically making this vid, this is the 3rd anniversary of Mikel Arteta obviously being here. If you had to pinpoint it, like, what sort of progress would you say specifically has been made under Arteta, or like the key sort of reason that's kind of upstarted where we are now, where we hope to go?
I think it's just a change of culture. You know, the standards that he expects from his players. And he said it from day one, didn't he? He absolutely said, he said, like, if you're here to work, great. If you're not, you know, get off the boat or get off the train, whatever it was. I can't quite remember. But it was really clear that he wasn't going to tolerate any messing. He wasn't going to tolerate the egos. He wasn't going to tolerate anybody that might harm the collective and you know, who was acting maybe not in the best interests of the club or the team. And I think that takes time. That takes a lot of time to you can say it, right? We could sit down and, you know, I could tell you now, you got to do this, this, and this, but it takes time to put those things in place,
Truly
right?
believe it as well, yeah.
Yeah, you do. And you have to find out, like, it's not obvious at first. It's not like when he comes in and says, this is the way we're going to do it, everyone's going to say, yeah, sure. That sounds great because, you know, he's the manager now and they're, you know, they want to play and all the rest of it. But you notice things over time. You see the way players behave, you see the way they train, you see the way they live, I think is another way that he put it as well. And you realize that, well, no, this guy, we can't have him. We can't have this here. So that's a painful thing to go through. And some of the divorces, if you like, have been particularly painful and difficult. Yeah. And you know, where he has been questioned because, you know, a couple of them have been really popular guys. But from his perspective, to build what he wants to build, he's willing to make really, really tough decisions. And look, we've got a long way to go in this season, but I think you'd have to say that those decisions have been justified, even if they were perhaps a bit damaging at the time when you think about some of the players involved.
Yeah.
You know, what they've done since tells you pretty much that he was right to make the decisions that he made. And then, of course, you know, on top of that culture, you're building a footballing culture too. It's not just about like being a headmaster, you know, it's about the kind of football that he wants to play with the kind of players that he wants to play that football. And it's hard work. Like I said earlier, there's a lot goes in on this training ground. You know, a lot of these guys make what we do look easy this season, but there's a lot of hard work,
of hard yards and stuff.
Yeah,
like
so
that.
that's it. I mean, it's hard work, and you put the hard work in, you get rewarded in football. Not always, but like if you don't put the hard work in, you definitely don't get any rewards. So I think that's what it is for me. You know, that change of culture where, like, I'm sure you remember the game against Man City not long before he was announced as manager. And there was sort of pictures of him like looking around going, what the hell is this place?
Yeah.
This is not the Arsenal that I remember when I was even a player. So trying to build that and, you know, to get where we've got in 3 years, it sounds like a long time, but in essence, it isn't really, because, you know, you've got a lot of work to do in that period of time. There's only so much you can do every transfer window. So it's sort of incremental. And to get where we are in 3 years, to be top of the table, I mean, hats off.
Like you said, hats off. And I agree with everything you said. I would say as well, beyond the obvious for me, man management, because you've got to make, you go through the squad. There's all, as you said, there's different personalities, different personnel. There's some players you could probably shout at and get a positive reaction. Others you might not. And he strikes me as he knows how to get a reaction out of people, and he knows how to provoke that sort of spark in someone to want to improve. Like you kind of said, you used a headmaster as an example. A teacher isn't always going to be effective if he's constantly looking at your test paper. He has to make make you want to learn, to do well. And I think Arteta has done that. He's made them buy into the collective. But I also think he's given them a sense of urgency away from Arsenal to be the best player you can be, whether that's Saka, Smith Rowe, players who've come in, etc., etc. And I've got nothing but love for that. And to go back to your point that I also echo about belief and stuff, I'm sure you've watched All or Nothing. I look back when we were losing at the start of this season, and it's in moments like that that you have to believe in what you're doing, because in truth, at the time, there's no reason to. Obviously, when we're top of the table, we're winning games. It's easy to be convinced. It's easy to want to play. It's easy to do these things. So that's what I give Arteta. And I also think he's shown, as you kind of said as well, big bollocks, really, because I look at Unai Emery, not to criticize him, bro, but
yeah,
I think he'd have a sense of regret, Unai Emery, because I think he tried to kind of be like a supply teacher. He tried to be everybody's friend. I think Mikel Arteta, a bit like Jurgen Klopp, has found that sort of healthy background in that I am your friend, but I'm also your manager. It's a give and take sort of street. And I think Arteta's done that. And I have to extend that to obviously Edu and those above him, because if he wanted to, you know, get rid of Aubameyang, Ozil, and other people didn't, like you've seen at other clubs, it's ineffective. It isn't going to happen. There's going to be player power. Now, a bit like Arteta, we've got young and hungry players keen to make their mark in the future. So I can't really complain. On the topic of this season, I know everybody's done well, but who would be the player of the season so far for you?
It's so difficult, actually. When you're saying that to me, I'm thinking like, oh my God, it could be Gabriel Jesus, because of the way he's transformed the attack. And of course, that plays into the worries that we have now that he's injured. It's hard to look beyond him as the most transformative player to this team, because, you know, previously we had Aubameyang, who was, you know, who just really wasn't doing it. Lacazette was willing, but just didn't have the legs. Yeah, exactly. He just couldn't do what Gabriel Jesus does. So I think in terms of the overall impact, it's hard to look beyond him, because even if he's not scoring, he's contributing to a team that's winning week in, week out. You know, I mentioned this, you know, a few times elsewhere, that the Chelsea game, you know, where he had 63 touches and Aubameyang had 8, just shows you, you know, what he has brought to this team. So I think it would be him, but just behind him, if I can cheat and add another couple, I think.
You can. I mean, there's not just one. People ask me that, and I'm like you. I could say Jesus, I'd say Odegaard, you could say Granit, you could say Saliba, you could say a lot of players.
Yeah, I was going to talk about Ben White,
Benjamin White as well, 100%. It's difficult, man.
And Saliba also, you know, to come in and just sort of hit the ground running, you know, from his debut to, you know, within a couple of weeks, everyone's just like, oh my God, this guy.
We've got a monster here,
we love this guy, you know, and he's still learning on the job to an extent. You know, there are bits and pieces, which is completely normal for a 21-year-old central defender, but what he's brought, you know, to this side in terms of presence, you could go front to back, and I think the interesting one is, like, I think Aaron Ramsdale's been very solid this season, but in truth, he hasn't really been as busy as an Arsenal goalkeeper has been.
Lovely
in the past.
To hear that.
Yeah, well, it's great, isn't it? You know, I'm happy for my goalkeeper to be a spectator for 90 minutes. I love that, you know. Whereas, you know, previously we've seen Bernd Leno stand out, have some good games, but it's because he's like trying to save 30 shots.
He's a busybody, yeah.
So it's fascinating to think, you know, where this team can go. And you mentioned Odegaard, Saka, Martinelli. Like, it's so difficult. It's like joint first, all of them. I don't know if I can break it down any further than that.
Exactly, and it just comes down to personal preference. I'm so happy that you touched on Benjamin White, Aaron Ramsdale. I'd also extend that to Gabriel, because obviously we don't pay to watch defenders. We pay to watch, you know, score goals, especially a club like Arsenal. So not to discredit our attackers, because they are a key part of our defense, like you see with Jesus, you know, in the same way Ramsdale plays out from the back. That's our first attacker. Jesus is our first defender. But I think our defenders need a lot more love, especially Ramsdale, because you see him, whether you're at the games or not, bellowing instructions. I think Granit Xhaka has been a revelation. And like you said, it could only get better. I'd say the one bad thing I'd have to say is that, as great as it's been, Smith Rowe hasn't been able to play a part, but hopefully he will be. You kind of touched on it, Jesus. Now, what do you think the impact of his injury is? Does it concern you? Would you bring in a striker? Would you wait until he's fit? Because we've got some tough games from now till February, to put it bluntly, really.
Yeah, it's such a tough one, because I think we don't have enough depth at centre forward. as it stands. You know, we've got Eddie, and maybe you can move Martinelli in there, but he speaks all the time about how he prefers playing on the left.
Yeah.
And then what do? You know, you can't make Eddie play every game, but at the same time, do you go out and buy a striker who's then going to be third choice in 3 months' time? That's a lot of money to spend on a transfer fee, maybe, and
In January as well.
wages. Yeah. So maybe they might think about a loan. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. They could think about a loan. And I think it's interesting you mentioned Smith Rowe, because if and when he does get fit, I wouldn't necessarily rule out the idea of Smith Rowe false nine.
You've been there
in certain games. We've been there. Hasn't always worked, but I don't think that means it can never work.
No, 100%. It can.
But obviously he's got to get fit. He was our second highest goal scorer last season, and you know, if we can bring him back in the second half of the season, if we can bring in, let's say, a winger, there's a lot of talk about, you know, certain individuals and deals that might be done in January. I just wonder if they might stick rather than twist, you know, when it comes to bringing in a striker, because if Jesus is back in February, then, you know, you've got a spare wheel, if you know what I mean. If you do something in the transfer market, that isn't something that you wanted to do anyway, you know. I think they will probably stick to whatever plan they had for January, and make do a bit at centre forward. Whether that turns out to be enough, though, we'll have to wait and see.
Like you said there, where are you at with other areas? Because I know you kind of touched on it. I would say until Jesus' injury, you could make a case of bringing in another striker in it and bringing in depth, but it's more of a thing where we was leaning towards either a left or right winger and central midfield. Where are you at specifically? I would say with central midfield, because for me personally, big fan of Granit, big fan of Partey, like what El Nene can bring to the table. We've obviously got Odegaard, Vieira, Zinchenko, Smith Rowe that can flirt in roles there. But I do, and obviously Lokonga, who's been a bit hit and miss. But I personally think we need a midfielder or two, someone that can do what Partey does long term, or maybe Granit. Because when you look at our team, I know a lot of fans start seeing 29, 30, and they act like they're 80 years of age. They can still help us, but we haven't really got longevity there with our three key midfielders, with El Nene, Partey, and Granit to a degree, as we have in defence and up front.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think Arsenal would be crazy if they weren't doing some succession planning already, you know, for those guys, which isn't to write them off and to say they can't contribute or anything else, but I think they must be thinking in the medium to long term, like, what are we going to do in these positions? Because they're two very, very important positions. And those two guys have been really good for us. We didn't really mention them when we were talking about our best players.
Yeah, we did them a disservice.
You know, but that's what I mean. You could basically go front to back and make a good case for everybody. Whether it happens in January or not, I'm not sure. I'm not convinced that it'll happen during the next transfer window. I suspect we might see one player come in the summer window, whether it's a sort of not backup, but like, let's say the heir to Partey or the heir to Xhaka. I don't quite know, but I think probably the summer window is a better window for that kind of a transfer, because like you say, there is plenty there at the moment. Partey, Xhaka, El Neni, Lokonga, Vieira, Odegaard, Smith Rowe can even play central if needs be. So I wouldn't say no, clearly, but I'm just not expecting it in January. But I think the club, you know, are very cognizant of the ages of these guys and what they're going to need to do in the market. You know, when the time comes, they need to get the right guy in. The way they've got the right guys in for right back, for goalkeeper, for striker, for left back, for, you know, all of these positions, for centre half, you know, they've got the right guys in, not just any old guy. And I think that's a really important part of why Arsenal are where we are at the moment. We haven't just said, right, we'll get any old guy in, because we did that for years and it never worked.
Yeah, and it didn't work for us. And yeah, like you said, I mean, that's where when I was saying earlier, I have to give credit to Arteta, Edu, and everyone for the talent ID, because it sounds stupid, but you get the right players in that fit your system that you believe in, you know, you do all right on the football field. Where are you at in terms of us scoring goals? Because I'm a bit in two minds. On one hand, I love the fact that we're spreading the goals out. I love the fact that we're not necessarily relying on people. I love the fact that if you was to say Arsenal's top goal scorer, a lot of people might not think Martin Odegaard, someone that can bring goals to him. But I'm just wary of it, because Martinelli looks like he's going to have a season like Smith Rowe and Saka last year. Obviously, the Highlanders can contribute, but they are not kind of seasoned vets, and it's always kind of volatile. Even Jesus, again, he's got 5 goals, and his game is based so much more on goals. There most important, but almost least important. I just kind of worry that if we kind of go through the volatility in the same way we're scoring every week, you know, we might not necessarily. So, like, we might make it a bit harder for us to score goals. So, where are you at with Odegaard being our top goal scorer right now?
Well, I mean, I think it's credit to Martin Odegaard. So, first and foremost, I mean, I think you could probably say that Gabriel Jesus should have maybe 3 or 4 more goals than he does.
Not to, yeah.
Yeah, just based on the chances he's had and the shots he's had. I think he was quite unlucky in one of the games. There was a really marginal offside and what have you. A couple of, you know, hit the post a couple of times. I mean, there's a big responsibility now on Eddie, isn't there? Eddie and Nketiah.
Massive, yeah.
You know, but what is Eddie but a poacher, a goal scorer? That's his whole bag, you know. So we saw at the end of last season that he can do it when he gets a run of games, and he's going to get a run of games now because Jesus is going to be injured.
Yeah.
Can we get him the service? How do we cope with the slight difference between Eddie and Jesus? You know, we know what Jesus contributes everywhere. I don't think Eddie can do that. You know, he can do some of it, but he can't.
It wouldn't be fair to ask him to. You're right.
No. So how do we slightly tilt the balance so we make sure that we get him service? But I do think there are goals in the team. You know, Odegaard, Saka, Martinelli. Eddie can score goals. Fabio Vieira, I think in the second half of the season, is somebody who could definitely crack in a 3 or 4 from distance. Who knows? I mean, the boy's got a left foot, as we saw earlier in the season. Was it the game against Lyon, I think? So, yeah, look, there are goals. It comes back to that idea of depth, though. And I think maybe getting Smith Rowe back, he's somebody who can score goals that I don't know too many other people in the team score, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
He's not quite a goal out of nothing guy, but sometimes he just is.
There's a healthy randomness about what he does.
Yeah,
I agree.
Randomness. I really like that. That's a great way of putting it. So if we can get him back, you know, it adds another goal threat. But I do think they will in January be looking for more firepower.
I'm with you on that. And I mean, like, on the topic of Smith Rowe, one thing that I liked about Smith Rowe is he could affect the game with being a super sub. And as you know, it's a squad game. We have five subs. You know, it's not just the Premier League and the tough games. We've got Oxford coming up and we want to go all the way in the FA and Europa League. So we kind of need depth. My final kind of question to you then really would be, with everything that we've said, what do you expect from West Ham and what are you kind of expecting? And obviously we need to get 3 points, but yeah, man, what do you expect from the challenge of West Ham?
It's a great question because I don't really know what our fitness situation is, our availability situation. I think West Ham are missing a couple of strikers. You know, I think we're going to face a team that's not doing as well as they would like so far this season. So it's going to be a really, really tough game. And this is where it comes back to, you know, what I was talking about earlier. Can we pick up where we left off? Do we have the momentum? Are these guys going to be able to sort of come straight back and, you know, put the World Cup to one side, put it behind them and just go again? I don't have any doubts in our desire, our ability to try and win football games. This is a weird situation. It's really hard to predict, to be honest. I'm glad that Arsenal are coming back, you know, because I think there's a lot of promise in this season. I think what we're all looking for in this second half of the season, where there's a lot of football still to play, is fulfilling a bit more of that promise. And you know, whether we can stay top of the table all the way through to May, I'm not sure. I'd love it, obviously, but I'm not quite sure we're not quite strong enough.
Man City,
but you know, this is a really fun ride so far this season, and we've all had to stop and get off. So we're getting back on again, and hopefully they can take us to a good place.
Amen, Andrew, like you said there. And for me, I'll kind of echo what you say. It's almost, for me, it's like from January until May, it's okay, cool. We was a bit of an unknown entity. We were just doing what we needed to do. We've done well. Now there's a bit of a target on our backs, like you said, with the form, with the injuries, with the fact that everybody kind of wants to spoil our day now. And we're kind of approaching the business end of the season. You know, we've got Newcastle at home, 2 losses between us. We've got the North London derby. We've got Manchester United. So I'm keen to see that. And as much as I'm loving the winning run, I want it to continue, but I want to see how we react to setbacks, because we're not going to win every game every time. Sometimes things are going to happen. I want to see if we could stay on that boat. So you're right. But in truth, I guess me and you are just going to have to see, Andrew, man. So on that note, I'll wrap it up, man. What content have you got to come, man? Where can people find you and everything? All this information will be in the description when this video's out, people. But
Yeah,
let them
just
know.
look at the website. It's arseblog.com. That's where all the podcasts and everything else are. Everything else stems from there. The news site, great coverage of the women's team and everything else. So
Great coverage of the women's team. I must say.
Thank you, man. We're very happy and very proud to. I think we're up there with the best of them. So Tim and the crew do amazing work on that as well. So yeah, pretty much everything you want to know about Arsenal from a news perspective on the blog and the podcast in all the usual places. So there you go.
And there you have it, man. Andrew, it's been fantastic to be with you, people. Please make sure you're hitting the like button and things like that. Andrew and everyone, stay blessed, take care, and I'll see you lot all soon, man. We're out.
There's always just that active red flag, defending.
I think it's like